Welcome to The Explainer. We're about to jump into a wild story about a powerful king, a moment of pride, and how it led to an absolute catastrophe for his entire nation. It's an old story for sure, but it asks this question that's just as relevant today. What's the real cost of leadership, and what does sacrifice truly mean?
So, let me ask you this. Can just one mistake from a leader really end up costing 70,000 lives? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack. This story is all about King David and how a single decision, one that came from a place of pride, spiraled into this devastating plague that brought his whole kingdom to its knees.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story kicks off with King David. He's this hugely powerful, very successful ruler. And one day, he decides he wants to count all his fighting men. Now you might think, okay, what's the big deal? But this wasn't about taxes or anything like that. No, this was purely about him wanting to measure his own military might. Basically, a way to puff out his chest and see just how strong he'd become.
Right away, his top commander, a guy named Joab, knew this was a really bad idea. He actually pushes back and asks the king, Why are you doing this? You're going to bring guilt on the whole nation. He could just sense that this was crossing a line, you know? But David was the king, and he wasn't listening. He just overruled him.
So the census happens, and the number that comes back is just staggering. We're talking 1,100,000 men who could handle a sword. I mean, what an incredible display of raw power. For a second there, David must have felt on top of the world. But yeah, that feeling was not going to last long. And here's the thing, the problem wasn't the act of counting itself. It was the reason for it. See, David was putting his trust in the size of his army, in his own power, instead of relying on God for protection. And almost as soon as the count is done, the weight of what he's done just hits him. He realizes it was, in his own words, a very foolish thing to do.
So now we get to the consequences. And they were swift and they were severe. God sends a prophet named Gad to confront David. But here's where it gets really interesting. God doesn't just hand down a punishment. Nope. He gives David a choice. And it's an absolutely terrifying one. Okay, listen to this choice. Option 1, 3 years of famine for the entire country. Option 2, 3 months of running from your enemies while they destroy everything. Or option 3, 3 days of a horrific, unstoppable plague. I mean, just think about that. There's no good answer here, right? It's just picking your poison, choosing between different kinds of absolute devastation.
So what does David do? In this moment of total distress, he makes this really fascinating, kind of controversial call. He chooses the plague. And his logic is, well, it's pretty profound. He says, let me fall into the hands of the Lord because his mercy is great. Just don't let me fall into human hands. He'd rather face God's judgment than the cruelty of men. It's a huge gamble, but that's the one he takes.
And that gamble, wow, it had a horrific cost. The plague rips through Israel, and in just 3 days, 70,000 people are dead. Can you imagine? David's moment of pride was being paid for, life by the very people he was supposed to protect.
But believe it or not, the horror wasn't over yet. The angel of destruction was now heading for the capital city itself, Jerusalem. This was the heart of the kingdom. The absolute climax of this disaster was about to unfold.
And at that exact moment, David looks up, and what he sees is just bone-chilling. It's an angel standing between heaven and earth, holding a drawn sword, pointing it right at Jerusalem. This wasn't just some abstract idea of a plague anymore. This was it, personified, ready to strike the final blow.
Seeing this, well, it just breaks him. David completely falls apart. He hits the ground and just begs God. He finally takes full, complete responsibility. He says, I'm the shepherd. I'm the one who sinned. These people are just sheep. What have they done? He pleads with God to let the punishment fall on him and his own family, but to spare the innocent people.
And in that moment of genuine repentance, God stops the plague, the angel's hand is stayed, and the exact spot where he stops, this becomes so important. It's a threshing floor owned by a man named Araunah, and this spot marks the end of judgment and the beginning of atonement.
So then a new command comes down. David is told to go to that very spot, that threshing floor, and build an altar to the Lord. This is what he has to do to formally end the plague and begin to make things right.
So David goes, and when he gets there, the owner, Araunah, sees him coming. He understands what's happening, and he makes this incredibly generous offer. He basically says, take it. Take the land, take my oxen for the sacrifice, take the wood for the fire, take all of it. It's a gift.
But David's response is so powerful. He refuses. He says, and this is the key line, I will not sacrifice a burnt offering that costs me nothing. He gets it. He understands that a sacrifice isn't a sacrifice at all if it doesn't cost you anything. For this to mean something, for it to be real, it had to come out of his own pocket.
And you'll see, this whole act of buying the land, it's so much bigger than just stopping a plague. What's happening here is he's actually laying a foundation for the entire future of his kingdom.
So David pays the full price, 600 shekels of gold, which was a ton of money. He buys the site, he builds the altar, he makes the sacrifice, and the plague is stopped. The crisis is over.
But here's the amazing part. The legacy of this moment is incredible. That very spot, that threshing floor, this place that saw judgment, repentance, and a really costly sacrifice, it would later become the site where David's son Solomon would build the great temple in Jerusalem, the absolute center of worship for the entire nation for centuries.
So what are we left with? Well, this ancient story leaves us with a pretty powerful question to chew on, doesn't it? What actually makes a sacrifice meaningful? It seems to be suggesting that real value, real meaning, isn't found in what we get for free. It's found in what we're willing to pay a price for. That a sacrifice is only as meaningful as what it truly, personally costs you.